The morning sun cast long shadows across the prairie grass as Samuel Morrison rode slowly toward the old homestead that had been abandoned for near on 3 months now. The wind carried the scent of wildflowers and the distant sound of cattle. Lowing in the valley below, his weathered hands held the reins with the easy confidence that came from 40 years of ranch work. Though today, something felt different about this familiar ride. Samuel had heard talk in town about strange happenings. At the old Henderson place, folks whispered about lights seen flickering in the windows after dark and smoke rising from the chimney when everyone knew Martha Henderson had moved back east to live with her sister after her husband passed. The neighbors were getting spooked, and as the closest rancher to the property, Samuel figured it was his Christian duty to investigate. As he approached the weathered fence line, Samuel noticed fresh tracks in the dust leading up to the house. His horse nickered softly, and he patted the animal's neck reassuringly. "Easy there, Thunder," he murmured. "We're just going to take a look, see what's what." The old Henderson house sat quiet in the morning light, its windows dark and curtains drawn. Samuel dismounted and tied Thunder to the hitching post that Jim Henderson had built with his own hands 20 years ago. Everything looked peaceful enough, but something made the hair on the back of Samuel's neck stand up. He walked slowly toward the front porch, his boots making soft sounds on the hard-packed earth. The morning was still and quiet save for the distant call of a meadowlark somewhere across the grassland. Samuel had always been a cautious man, and years of dealing with rattlesnakes and wild horses had taught him to trust his instincts when something felt off. "Hello," he called out in a voice that carried easily across the yard. "Anyone home? I'm Samuel Morrison from the next ranch over, just checking on things." No answer came from inside the house, but Samuel thought he heard a small sound like someone shifting their weight on old floorboards. He waited a moment longer, then called out again. "Ma'am, if you're in there, I'm not looking for any trouble. Just want to make sure everything's all right." This time he definitely heard movement from inside, and after a moment the front door opened just a crack. A woman's voice came through the narrow opening, barely above a whisper. "Please don't come any closer," she said, and Samuel could hear the fear trembling in her words. "I'm not looking for any trouble either." Samuel stopped where he was and removed his hat, holding it respectfully in both hands. "Ma'am, I don't mean you any harm," he said gently. "My name is Samuel Morrison, and I ranch just over the next hill. Folks in town have been worried about this place, and I thought I'd ride over to make sure no one was in need of help." The door opened a little wider, and Samuel could see part of a young woman's face peering out at him. She had dark hair that hung loose around her shoulders and eyes that looked like they'd seen more trouble than any person should have to bear. She was maybe 30 years old, though it was hard to tell for certain, given the wariness that seemed to age her features. "I don't need any help," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "I'm just staying here for a little while until I can figure out where to go next." Samuel could see rope marks around her wrists and what looked like bruises on her arms. The sight made his jaw tighten with anger, but he kept his voice calm and steady. "Ma'am, it looks to me like maybe you've had some trouble recently, and I want you to know that whatever's happened, I'm not here to judge or cause you more problems." The woman's composure crumbled at his words, and she began to cry softly. "Please don't look at me," she whispered. "I know what you must be thinking. I know how I must appear to you." Samuel felt his heart break a little at the pain in her voice. "Ma'am, I don't know your story, but I can see you're hurting, and that's all I need to know to want to help you. Would you mind telling me your name?" After a long moment, she whispered. "Elizabeth. Elizabeth Carter." "Well, Miss Elizabeth," Samuel said with gentle formality, "it's a pleasure to make your acquaintance even under these circumstances. Now, I don't know what's brought you to this place or what you've been through, but I can see you're in need of kindness, and that's something I've got plenty of." Elizabeth opened the door a little wider, and Samuel could see more of her now. Her dress was torn and dirty, and she held herself like someone who expected to be struck at any moment. The rope marks on her wrists were angry and red, and Samuel had to work to keep his expression neutral. "Was taken," she said so quietly he had to strain to hear her. "3 men took me from my home 2 weeks ago, and they kept me tied up in their camp while they decided what to do with me. I managed to get away 3 nights ago, and I've been hiding here ever since." Samuel felt a surge of protective anger, but he kept his voice steady. "You're safe now, Miss Elizabeth. Those men aren't going to hurt you anymore. Have you eaten anything in the past few days? She shook her head, and Samuel could see how thin she'd become. I've been afraid to leave the house during the day. She admitted. I found some preserves in Martha's pantry. But that's all. Samuel nodded, understanding why she'd been so afraid. Well then, the first thing we need to do is get some proper food in you, and after that we'll figure out the rest. Would you be willing to let me help you? Elizabeth studied his face for a long moment, as if trying to read his intentions. Finally, she nodded slowly. I don't have anywhere else to go, she said, and the defeat in her voice made Samuel's chest tighten. Samuel smiled warmly. Well, you do now, Miss Elizabeth. You have a place at my table for as long as you need it, and that's a promise. Over the next hour, Samuel helped Elizabeth gather the few belongings she had with her, and they rode slowly back to his ranch Thunder, carrying double with Elizabeth sitting behind Samuel. Holding on with trembling hands, Samuel kept up a gentle stream of conversation about the countryside they passed, trying to ease her obvious nervousness. My late wife Mary would have loved meeting you, he said as they crested a hill and his ranch came into view. She always said a person's past doesn't define their future, only their choices do. And I've always found that to be true. Samuel's ranch was a modest but well-maintained operation with a comfortable two-story house surrounded by sturdy outbuildings. His cattle grazed peacefully in the near pasture, and chickens scratched in the yard around the front porch. It looked like the kind of place where a person could find peace, and Elizabeth felt some of the tension leave her shoulders. Samuel helped her down from Thunder and led her toward the house. I'll put you in Mary's sewing room, he said. It has a good, strong lock on the door and windows that face the sunrise. She always said morning light was the best medicine for a troubled soul. As they entered the house, Elizabeth was struck by how clean and orderly everything was, despite being maintained by a man living alone. Photographs of a smiling woman with kind eyes lined the mantelpiece, and fresh wildflowers sat in a vase on the kitchen table. That's my Mary, Samuel said, noticing Elizabeth looking at the photographs. Been gone 2 years now, but I still talk to her every morning over coffee. She always was the one with all the wisdom in this family. Elizabeth felt tears welling up again at his gentleness. How can you be so kind to someone like me? She whispered. Samuel turned to face her, and his expression was infinitely compassionate. Miss Elizabeth, he said softly, I don't know what those men told you about yourself, or what they made you believe, but I want you to listen carefully to what I'm about to say. You are not defined by what was done to you. You are a human being deserving of kindness and respect, and anyone who tells you different is wrong. That evening, Samuel prepared a simple meal of beef stew and fresh bread, while Elizabeth sat at his kitchen table wrapped in one of Mary's quilts. She had bathed and changed into some of Mary's clothes that Samuel had offered, and though they were a little large, they were clean and warm as they ate. Samuel told her stories about his life on the ranch, and about Mary, who had clearly been the center of his world. She was a school teacher, he said with a smile in his voice, and she never met a person she couldn't find something good in. She used to say that everyone carries both light and shadow inside them, and it's our job to help each other find the light. Elizabeth listened quietly, occasionally asking questions about the ranch or the surrounding area. Samuel could see her beginning to relax slightly, though she still startled at sudden sounds and kept glancing toward the windows. After dinner, Samuel showed her to Mary's sewing room, which he had prepared with fresh linens and a small bouquet of prairie roses. The room smelled faintly of lavender and sunshine, and Elizabeth felt safer than she had in weeks. In the days that followed, Samuel was endlessly patient with Elizabeth's healing process. He never pressed her to talk about what had happened, but he was always available to listen when she was ready. He taught her to help with simple ranch chores, and gradually she began to find purpose in the daily rhythms of feeding chickens and tending the vegetable garden. One evening, as they sat on the front porch watching the sunset, Elizabeth finally found the courage to tell Samuel the whole story. The men who took her had been drifters passing through town, and they had seen her leaving the general store alone. They had grabbed her and dragged her to their camp with the intention of selling her to a brothel in the next territory. Samuel listened without judgment, though his hands clenched into fists at times as she described her captivity and the cruelty she had endured. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. Eliza,